But if this company is hurting, then the pain and loss kind of compounds. The reason I'm saying this is because, again, China owns a whole lot of our United States national debt, which is no problem when things are good. But that comes with a big risk. Oh man, I never liked risk. The risk is if China wanted to hurt the United States economy, they could suddenly sell all of the United States debt and unload it to the market. And this would kind of be like an economic attack to the United States. And that could start kind of like an economic war. What you talking about, Jasperito? Let me explain what I mean by going back in time to 2008. Before the whole 2008 crash, Russia and China had loaned a ton of money to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were government-sponsored entities whose job was to support our housing market. Well, when the whole 2008 real estate crash happened, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were bleeding cash and the government was losing a lot of money trying to support them. Well, that's when Russia had the idea to kick the United States when it was down. During the 2008 recession, the United States was already hurting. And that's when reports came out that Russia went to China and tried to convince China to sell all of their Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac loans to hurt the United States economy even more. Essentially, this would have forced the United States government to go into even more debt to support Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. This would have been a huge blow to the United States economy when we were already hurting, but China said no. Well, now in 2020, China is one of the biggest holders of our United States national debt, and if they wanted to hurt the United States economy, they could potentially try to unload or sell all of this United States debt. This would devalue our United States debt, it would hurt the United States dollar, and it would hurt our economy. The reason this is a concern now is because, well, the United States is threatening sanctions on China because of this whole pandemic, and there are talks of another potential trade war starting with the United States threatening tariffs on China. Essentially, these are ways for the United States to tax China and hurt their economy by making it harder for China to do business with the United States, and it's a way to encourage things to be made in the United States. Now, what you should understand is this isn't the first time that the United States has ever been worried about China potentially unloading all of the United States loans. The United States and China had a similar trade war back in 2018 for different reasons, obviously, but then people were worried about China unloading all of the United States treasuries then too. When that trade war happened in 2018, the stock market suffered and people were worried about a potential recession. But the difference between now and then is back in 2018, the United States economy was still very strong. Now in 2020, our economy is shut down. That's why this foreign debt is so much riskier now.
So, what was wrong about that?
It is going to be easier to say what was right.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Hold on a moment. Okay, I'm just trying to get back to the Skype screen here. Okay, there you go. Mm-hmm. We have to understand what debt is.
Right.
We have to understand what money is. We have to understand what it means to unload debt. We have to understand a whole lot of things. So I could say that he's wrong about quite a few things, but it's not going to be convincing until we understand what these things mean.
Right.
So China holds our debt. Yes, they do. But the word debt, when it refers to the federal government, means absolutely nothing compared to what you and I as individuals think of as the word debt. Mm-hmm. So what we think of as the word debt, the government just simply does not have. And if your viewers go out to a YouTuber named Mike Norman, okay. He's an investor. He has several videos that, and I could provide links. In fact, I'll write it down. Mike Norman debt. Has several videos that says the United States has no debt. There is no such thing as a debt to the United States government. When we think of the word debt, as you and I think of that word, we had to borrow money because we don't have it, and now we have to pay it back with interest. We are in debt. And if we don't, we will go broke. We will go bankrupt. There is no possibility for that reality to happen to the United States government. And the reason is we don't create money.
Mm-hmm.
The United States government creates money, more accurately stated as issues the currency. They're the god of money. So if you were the god of money, the only entity in the entire world that was allowed to create it, is it possible, would you ever be in a situation where you would need to go and get that money from someone else? To get your own money from someone else? Does that make sense?
No, because they can just create it.
You can create it. And not only that, if you got it from somebody else, where would they have had to have gotten it from?
From you.
From you. So what's the point of going out and getting money from someone else when you're the only one that's allowed to create it because you can just create it for yourself? It makes no sense to say that the god of money, the issuer of the currency, the one and only issuer of the currency, according to the United States Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, the Congress is the only entity in the world that is allowed to create the United States dollar. So to say that the government, led by Congress, is in debt, when we use the word debt as you and I as currency users use that term, it just makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, to say that China has our debt, in a very technical accounting sense, that's true, but that is completely different than the word debt means to me and you. So yes, China owns our debt, and when we say that China owns our debt, they have sold us products made in China, and in return, we give China U.S. treasuries, securities, bonds, T-bills, just treasuries. And those treasuries are held in the United States Treasury. In the United States. There's no suitcases of dollar bills in China. Mostly speaking, I'm sure there's a few, but not as the trillions of dollars that they have, or a trillion in bonds that they have, in treasuries that they have, is held in a computer at the United States Treasury. So when I let's back up for a little bit now. Mm-hmm. If Congress passes a law, let's say they pass a Medicare for All law, mm-hmm. and in that Medicare for All law, there's $1 trillion in spending, new spending, because we have to build, we have to build hospital wings onto hospitals all across the United States, okay? Mm-hmm. So we have to build it, we have to get the materials, we have to get the construction workers, we have to get the nurses and doctors and beds and computers and medicine and medical supplies, medical devices, security staff, administrative staff, parking valet, all of these things. So we have to get all of this new spending, that's what it's going to go to. So they do the work, the construction builders do the construction, they gather the materials, the security people, go in every night, and so every week we pay them. They've done their work, and then we give them a paycheck. And once they get that paycheck, they get to keep it forever, right? They don't owe it to anyone, all right? So that's one way that the government gives people money, is to just give them money because they've done work. Mm-hmm. Or that worker goes to a restaurant, and the restaurant supports the workers that do that work. Mm-hmm. So that's how money works its way through the economy. A bill gets passed into law, the bill was written by Congress, then the money is created and it goes out to the companies that have contracts to build these hospital wings because of the law. Those companies pay their employees, those employees go shopping. Okay, so that's one way that money gets into the economy. That's how people get what I'm going to call net financial assets. That just means free money. Mm-hmm. No strings attached. They've done work, they've paid their debt in advance, and now they have net financial assets. They just have money to spend. That's one way. Now the other way is when the Federal Reserve, which is the bank of the banks and the Bank of Congress, can create trillions of dollars. But the only way that they can do it outside of a law is to trade, even trades, swaps. So another way that they can do it is by saying, I have $1 trillion for you, this bank, but I can't give it to you unless you give me $1 trillion in treasuries. Mm. So it's an even swap. Okay? Okay. So now, going back to China.
Right.
China has treasuries. that treasury is essentially like a savings account because a treasury gives interest, right? And you can't access it as easily as you can a checking account. Checking account you can access immediately, but it doesn't pay as much interest, right? A savings account, you can't access it as easily, but it earns you some interest. So if you want to use that money in a treasury, you have to transfer it to your checking account and write a check and so on. So when China dumps their treasuries, they are telling the United States, I want to redeem my treasury. And so the government, the treasury, gives them, say, $100, it's $100, $1 trillion. I want to redeem my $1 trillion treasury. Treasury gives them $1 trillion. So now China, instead of having treasuries that earn interest, now have money that doesn't earn interest. So is China in a better position or in a worse position than they were before? They had a treasury that was earning interest, and now they told the treasury, I want to redeem my treasury. I want to dump my treasuries. So the treasury gives them money for their treasury. $1 trillion gives them $1 trillion. That $1 trillion in cash does not earn any interest. So is China in a better position than they were, or in a worse position?
They're in a better position, right?
They're in a worse position. Slightly worse position, because now instead of having a treasury that earns interest, now they have cash that doesn't earn interest. Okay? So dumping their treasuries is just swapping their interest-earning instruments, and just an instrument is just a treasury or a bond or so on, just a fancy word for that. So they have an interest-bearing treasury, and they trade it for non-interest-bearing cash. That's all it means to dump their treasuries, to dump their debt. Their debt is that treasury. That's what debt is the treasuries that they hold. So when they redeem their treasuries, they are exchanging it in an even swap for cash that doesn't earn interest. That's all they're doing. So it's the same exact amount of money in the economy, except now China has money that's not earning interest, and they're in a slightly worse position because now they have money that's not making money, where before they had money that was making money. They had treasuries that were earning interest. So everything that he's saying about China has our debt.
Right.
Yes, they do, but it has nothing to do with what you and I think of as the word debt. The word debt at the federal level just means they're holding treasuries. And when they get rid of them, they are simply swapping them for money that doesn't make interest. That's all they're doing. And that money still is in the treasury. It doesn't go to China. So to say that a swap, an even swap, that puts them in a slightly worse position is somehow an attack on the American economy or an economic war doesn't make any sense. The only things that China can do is redeem their treasuries, or they can sell them to another country, which again has their treasuries in the United States in the computers of the treasury, or I'm sure there's another alternative, I can't think of it at the moment. So no, there is nothing that China can do to hurt us as far as their treasuries are concerned. Yes, they could launch a war, that would hurt us. But as far as they're using their treasuries as a weapon, there is little to nothing that they can do to hurt us, even if it's trillions.